this is the MakeHaven machine shop. And just as a little background, MakeHaven is a nonprofit organization where people can join and get access to all the tools and machine through a membership. So it's open to the community as long as you're above 18 years of age, or you can access some things if you're with a parent.
How much is it per month, and when is this available, or is this available all day, every day?
Yeah, so we are open 24/7. There's a bunch of volunteers who are here on a schedule in order to help people learn how to use the tools, and so that's scheduled time. The cost is $50 per month, although we have a mission of giving access to tools across the community, and so we don't deny anybody based on cost. We have a scholarship program so that we ensure anyone can access the space.
Have you ever done training classes in any of the local schools or universities?
We haven't done any in the schools or universities. We've certainly seen a fair share of people from those institutions come and get engaged in our community and learn new techniques and things, often outside of their primary area of interest.
Could you maybe show us around some equipment that's in here, maybe something that's your favorite?
It's all my favorite. Right here, we have a couple of different band saws. The vertical is what more people are familiar with. The horizontal is great for straight stock that you can actually sit on here. This vertical actually has an automated function, so it will hit this trigger and just cut at the same length over and over. So it's great for accuracy for things like table legs, where you might want to cut a whole bunch of them and have them be even. Back here, you see two examples of injection molders. So in the machine shop, we do metal, but we also do plastic. This is a very simple machine here. You can see examples of molds have been made out of aluminum. What's interesting is we have a Formlabs resin printer, and that can actually print injection moldable high temperature prints. So we're looking at the various workflows, and the tools are all stronger together. So this would, you pour the plastic in, inject it out the nozzle into the cavity. This is a bigger version of that, which can do more volume by a significant margin. And it's not what you're going to do for a very big production run. Those machines are fully automated. This is great for prototyping or a small batch run so that you can learn whether the mold works and the product is saleable. You know, making hundreds or 1,000 or even a couple thousand, but not thousands upon thousands. We have more with plastic, so we have a little compression oven. With all these tools, we do have a system for buddies. We want to make sure that people are using it safely. And that means that we have classes, both some formal classes where people register and they pay separately, like for the Bridgeport Mills and the lathes, but we have videos and our volunteer orientations to each of the tools. For the tools that are designated a buddy, those are tools where they can cut off a limb, or you can have a life-threatening injury. We have a safety committee that rates that. There does have to be somebody in the room with you in order to respond if necessary. So we take precautions. Bridgeport Mills, I think many engineers are going to be familiar with these. A lot of folks will come in and just have a lot of history and attachment to these types of machines because of how much they did. Before CNC machines, everything was done through the manual manipulation of a machine like this to mill down and shape metal. And there's still a tremendous amount of learning value in listening to the tool, to feeling it, to having that feedback that is not as easy to get from a CNC. So we try and have people learn how to use a Bridgeport mill before we put them on the CNC operated metal.
Now, what if somebody worked as a machinist and needed to stop in and use the machine? Would they have to take the class like everybody else, or would there be a way to prove their competency?
Yeah, so we're membership based, and that means we have an orientation and safety rules and various setups, so there isn't any dropping in and using the machine. But if a machinist, and we have several machinists that are excited to use the space and volunteer here, wanted to use the mill, they would need to show some documented proof of their work history using that mill or educational history using that mill, and then they would meet with one of our volunteers to demonstrate the safe operations who would verify, but then they can jump right on the machine. Now, if you haven't had that experience, we have a one-day course, and that takes you from not knowing the machine at all to being able to operate the machine.
Is there any dress code?
Yeah, so we have various pieces of safety equipment obviously the safety goggles with hearing protection. In certain situations, there are things like sleeves or gloves to prevent cuts. Certainly welding has a jacket. We also, when you're using machines like this, you would have to have short sleeves, you have hoodie ties, those would be, have to be secured, hair has to be secured. So during the operation of the tool, there are certain conditions you learn about with that tool to make sure you're operating it with the right attire. But we have a bunch of grinders, chop saws, arbor press. These items are for shaping sheet metal in various ways, bending, breaking, stretching, and so on. This is our CNC machine. So once you've learned the fundamentals on Bridgeport, we actually have a wood CNC that we have people learn as well, because wood is a little more forgiving. And then once you combine those two skills, you can come in here and use this personal CNC.
So do you teach both the programming of like toolpaths and the physical operation of the machine, or do you only do the machine aspect of it?
Once you've learned the Bridgeport, you're learning a lot of how the materials work, how to hold something in the machine, feeds and speeds. These things are learned somewhat intuitively through using that. And then on the wood side, we actually use a Shapoka, which is lower stakes. It's you could like stop it with your hand kind of CNC machine. And it gives you the starting fundamentals, which then get upgraded to this CNC. Slightly different software between the CNCs, but the concepts are the same.
Regarding materials, do you guys have materials here that you can purchase, or would you advise bringing them in, or do you have a scrap area for materials?
Sure, we definitely have a lot of scrap, and members have an internal chat, so a lot of time there's exchange of materials, or there's tips on where to get good materials. People can bring in their own materials as long as they don't present any sort of hazard to other folks. Something that's very combustible would not be allowed. We also do have some materials for sale. It's a very small amount, and we don't intend to be a store, but there's some things that people need most frequently, and it's hard for them to get without a car, and so we try and do what we can to facilitate the convenience and making things.
Can you tell us about the types of welders you have here?
So the MIG welder, metal inert gas, is good for a whole bunch of different kinds of metals. It's particularly easy to use. It's often referred to as a metal hot glue gun. We also behind it have a spool gun for aluminum that has aluminum welding capabilities. Not every alloy of aluminum, but a lot of them. Next we have different types of gas for shielding different kinds of welding. Here we have two stick welders, both AC and DC welding, and a small plasma cutter.
And then behind that curtain is our oxyacetylene setup. We also have this high temperature kiln, which is programmable. Some of our members have used it for knife making, for example. We have a system over here for being able to quench that. And knife making is interesting because it incorporates so many different elements within the metal shop. Cutting the shape, sharpening it, heat treating it. A lot of folks have actually made wooden handles that they then incorporate into it. They have worked with leather, sometimes even cutting the leather on the laser cutter in the main fabrication space. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do to make often a gift.
We're hoping to get TIG soon. TIG will allow us to do titanium. A lot of people like to build bikes and make other things out of titanium and stainless and do fine work, which can be easier with the TIG setup than it can be with some of the others.
Could you elaborate maybe on what a badged user means? It says for this welding area that only the badged users are allowed.
Yeah, so a badged user is someone who has gone through the steps that we put in place. Typically, it's watching a video about the tool use, taking a quiz, and then meeting on location with one of our volunteers to demonstrate and work with them to make sure that they have the skills to use that tool. For each and every tool, pretty much, we have a little process. So it takes some time to get up to speed. And then it's like a game. We can count how many badges you've earned, and people have rankings and so on. It's a way to incentivize learning and exploring inside of your limited area. Back here, you can see we have a couple of metal lathes, which are fundamental machine for rounding and preparing various metal objects. One of the crown jewels of the entire tour and machine shop here is the water jet cutter.
The water jet's a pretty incredible tool. It's a CNC, meaning computer numerically controlled machine, that is similar to a lot of other CNC machines in that there is a head that's moved by motors in a Cartesian coordinate plane. In this case, it shoots water up to 30,000 psi by a pretty hefty pump over there, and is drawn into a mixing tube mixed with garnet abrasive, and it will shoot and just abrade through nearly any material that is softer than the garnet, which is most materials. This is a block of steel, stainless steel. You can cut through, up to probably 6 inches of any material. The thicker it is, the longer it takes. Here's a chunk of Stony Creek granite that someone cut through. You can cut through foam, leather, wood, you name it. The jet of water is really thin, which means that compared to a CNC router, which has an internal radius that's defined by the size of the bit, here you can get nearly square internal corners. You can also cut things to about the accuracy of plus or minus 1,000th of an inch, which is pretty darn good for finer accuracy work. You can also control how good of a cut you want. If you want it to be really precise, then you can slow it down. If you're okay with a more rough cut and a greater taper in the cut, you go faster.
If you do make a mistake using simple equipment or something breaks, do you guys have a procedure or a plan?
Certainly, we're very careful to have first aid and those sorts of things in place if there is an injury. If there is an unintentional breakage of the machine, it would depend on the circumstance. Typically, the consumables are paid for by the person, so the bit you're going to use in the machine is the most likely thing to break, and you would be buying that in the first place since that's a consumable. All right, well, thank you so much for coming out. It was a pleasure to host you.
Thank you very much.